Hello everyone, it is I, Anime Outlet, and this is What If Deku Stayed Quirkless. And now, let's begin. Mates. Izuku would look up at Aizawa and All Might and would then smile at them and would thank them for teaching him throughout the years he was training to become a hero. Aizawa would then look down at Izuku and would tell him something. Well, Izuku, I hope to see you become the number one hero someday. I hope you grow well as a hero now that you've graduated UA High School. Izuku would thank All Might and Aizawa, walking back with his high school diploma, sitting down in his seat. Moments later, Izuku's eyes would open as he would start to breathe very heavily. What, what was that? Izuku would look around. His surroundings were very unfamiliar, as he would then see he was on a building, a rooftop, in fact. And this is where he would start to get flashbacks. This is the exact rooftop where he had met All Might, where All Might had crushed his dreams right there in front of him. And there it was. Was he teleported here by some type of quirk? Or what happened? Izuku would look down at himself as he would see he was still wearing his middle school clothes. That was very strange, Izuku thought, as he would then pull out his phone and would check the time. It was the day he finished middle school and where he turned in his slip to go to UA High School, to register to go to UA High School for the tryout, to try to make it to get into UA High School, and it was the exact day he had done that. This doesn't make any sense. Moments ago, he had just been told he graduated UA, and now it was the day that he registered to go to UA. Izuku would be confused as he would start to walk down the steps of a very cold stairway. He was confused by this. Everything was just so crazy to him. He was moments away from becoming a hero, his dream, and yet now he was farther back, even harder now, as he didn't have one for all. He had nothing. He was still quirkless. This was before he even got All Might's quirk. So Izuku would be walking down the stairway as he would then start walking down the sidewalk. He would remember about how he tried to save Bakugo, and so he would try to look for something to happen like this again, but nothing did. In the exact spot, Izuku would be standing in the alley where Bakugo had started to get suffocated by the sludge villain. However, nothing was there, even though it was the exact time it happened in his dream. Izuku didn't know what to do. He went back to his mother's house as she would greet him like always, as Izuku would just not even answer her, going right to his room completely silent. His mother would get worried by this, but would think nothing of it, seeing as he's come home many days very silently, as she would just think he had a rough day at school and would pretty much think nothing of it, brushing it aside. So Izuku would sit in his chair right at his desk, thinking very long and hard. He had not forgotten all the things he had learned in the school, but was it really useful to learn those? Sure, he did remember being trained by All Might, so quite possibly he could try out to make it into UA. He had been trained by All Might in his dream, so why not just try to copy that? So that's exactly what Izuku did. The hard worker he was decided not to let this get past him and would keep this as further motivation. He had graduated from UA once, and so he can do it again. So Izuku would start to exercise. He would start to lift weights. He would start to clean up the beach as he had done everything All Might had told him in his dream, starting a workout and a diet to maintain and grow his muscle mass, as he had learned everything from All Might how to exercise, and he had already learned that once. So he decided to work himself even harder, trying to push his body to the very, very limits. And this is the drive that is seen in most heroes that want to become number one. And Izuku used his pain of suddenly just being shifted into another reality. He had woken up from a dream where he was about to become the number one hero, at least in his thoughts. So now he used that anger. He knew he could get into UA, so he decided to try even harder, to try and have even a better chance at getting into UA. He knew he could not mess up the entrance exams, so he tested himself to the very, very limits, as he would then enroll himself in different martial arts classes and just trying to get any bit of knowledge that he could to give him any further chance of getting into UA. He knew he was quirkless, and he knew that was a liability. However, there is many heroes that fight quirkless, such as Eraserhead. However, they just have a tiny boost where they can erase in other villains' quirk. Izuku doesn't have that, so if he were to become a hero, he would have to rely on support type gadgets. So he would have to make the best of his body, so he'd try to get as strong as possible, even learning how to use different sorts of weapons like knives and katanas, so he could very easily use this and possibly even outsmart somebody with a quirk. Izuku knew he's not going to be able to just he can't outstrength somebody with a quirk, especially someone with a strength quirk, say like Muscular in season 3 of My Hero Academia. So Izuku would obviously have to push himself in not only physically but also mentally, having to study very long hours so he could learn types of flex ability type things to stretch and make his body even more capable of moving around at such speeds that he needed to be able to outmaneuver and outsmart certain people with quirks. Now, Izuku's main goal was hopefully end up dueling Bakugo and beating him, not only passing UA, but also being able to fight Bakugo, and that's what Izuku wanted to do. So Izuku would end up training his mind, his brain, and his all of his muscles for those exact 10 months up until the UA entrance exam. Izuku would get up early, getting a very nice breakfast, as he would then start to travel over to UA High School, where he would then start to breathe in, practicing his breathing techniques that he learned to calm himself down. He was very stressed out. This is it. The exact moment he was waiting for. He could finally try his best in the entrance exam. He barely got passed in the first time, so he decided to try it this time and hope that he can get even more points than just the rescue points that he had. And he knew there was rescue points, so he also tried to do this as well. So Izuku would be walking into an auditorium, as he would then see the hero President Mike, who was a teacher there at the high school. Izuku would look down as he was sitting in the upper rows, as President Mike would then start to speak. He would start to explain how these students are going to be doing two tests, the smarts test or the IQ test. Well, it wasn't really an IQ test, it was just a test to see what type of class they were in and if they are even capable of being in UA. Remember, this is a very prestigious school that is very, very smart. They have very, very many classes that are well above average in the smarts category. So you have to be insanely smart to make it into this school, unless you do well on the hero course. That is the only place where you get an exception. If you fail or are just close to passing on the written test, well, then you have a small chance to pass in the heroes test or the physical test or the exercise test, where you get to destroy as many robots as possible. And depending how you do on there, you could possibly be put into a hero class, which isn't relatively smarter than some of the other classes, but they still work very, very hard, and you're expected to be above average in smarts and brains. I can't really think of the right word, really. I mean, I should be able to know a word that's not smarts or brain, but I'm just like, I can't think of anything else. So Izuku would be sitting there listening to President Mike as he would explain those, as he would then pass out the test, telling the students he will explain the fitness test after they complete the written test, just so they don't have to worry about anything that could possibly harm their chances of doing well on the test. He said that to those who were taking the hero test, of course. So Izuku would of course pass this test very, very easily. Remember, he had been studying for almost 10 months. Why wouldn't he pass it with flying colors? It was pretty obvious that Izuku would do that in the first place. So Izuku would then look down at President Mike as the rest of the students would start to finish around him, and most of them clearing out as they weren't going to take the hero course, just trying to make it into the UA C class, where they weren't really trying to make it into the hero course. They were just trying to make it into a class so they would have very good things on their resume for perhaps a high school or perhaps a college or another job, so they wouldn't have to work at some random fast food place working the drive-through. So Izuku would then look down at President Mike once again, as he would see President Mike starting to explain all of the different things they would be doing. He would start to explain all the robots, the 0 pointer, the 1 pointer, the 2 pointer, and the 3 pointer, as these would give them points if they were to destroy it. And he would also mention a secret factor to the test, but they would have to discover that themselves. So President Mike would then give them each a card, which would have a letter on it. Now there would be three letters: A, B, and C. If you had an A card, you would be pushed into the hallway for City A, where the doors would open and you would be released into the city and forced to destroy robots. If you were taking the hero test, of course. And the same thing would go for B and C, except for City B and City C. So Izuku would be placed in City C, as he would then start to walk, looking at the huge doors, wondering who could possibly be that huge to have doors that big. Now, Izuku wasn't allowed to have his weapons that he had trained so much for, since it was a rule in UA you could not have your weapons if you were taking the hero course, as they just thought anybody taking the hero course was had a quirk, so an extra weapon would just give them an advantage that other students may not have had. So they would say no weapons at all, not thinking about anybody who's quirkless. Despite this, Izuku wouldn't care. He would know he had to try his hardest, as he would get into a laser focused mode, knowing this was it. This was his time to shine, and this is where he was going to basically try his absolute hardest. So Izuku would then be standing at the doors as he would see them start to open. And as soon as he saw the hole where the doors were opening was big enough for him to get through, he would launch himself forward, as the rest of the people there who were also taking the test were just confused, as they started to laugh at him, thinking he had false started and was going to get disqualified and couldn't even make it. He couldn't even take the test to go into the hero course anymore. However, President Mike would then talk over the loudspeakers, just laughing at them for saying a hero must go as soon as the doors open. Heroes don't wait for somebody to say go. This is where those same people realize that Izuku was the one they should be following and to start destroying robots as well, as they would then go into the city and start to destroy robots. Izuku, however, had already started to punch robots and destroying them, racking up a good 15 points in the around minute that those people were just sitting there not doing anything. Izuku would run around just destroying as much robots as possible, as he would then count up how many robots he would destroy, as he would realize he had only destroyed 25 points worth of robots, as Izuku would look down at his fists, as different types of metal and glass were just sticking in his fists, as blood was running down his arms. As other people looked at him as if he was okay, but Izuku wouldn't need their help. He just told them to stop looking down on him, as he would start to run off and to start fighting other robots. Now, during those 10 months of training, Izuku had sort of been looked down on and pitied while he was in the martial arts classes and fighting other kids. They thought they could easily beat him just because he had no quirk. However, that truly wasn't the case. And then when Izuku would beat them, they would despise Izuku. How dare some random quirkless kid beat some high and mighty person with a quirk? It was just unheard of. So Izuku would learn to hate people that looked down on him and pitied him. Now, this is why he ended up telling those people looking down and pitying him for the blood running down and asking if he needed help. He would just brush them off, saying no, he didn't need help, as he would rush off trying to eat even more robots, hoping that he can somehow manage to squeak into Class 1A or even Class 1B. He didn't care. He wanted to get into that hero class. So Izuku would continued on his rampage, getting just around 30 points, as he would then hear the ground rumbling, as he would hear a girl cry for help. Izuku would realize this is Ochako Uraraka, as he would rush off in the direction that he heard her screams, as he would look up to see the massive zero pointer looking down on him. Izuku would not care about this, as he would start to rush over to where she was, only to realize the zero pointer had already started to reach down to her, as Izuku would somehow be able to lift the boulder off of her legs and pick her up to carry her over and out of the reach of the zero pointer, as she would thank him, as Izuku would then walk off, realizing that the test had finished. Now, of course, this is where the healer, how did I forget her name? Man, I am so stupid. This is where Recovery Girl would end up coming to Izuku and telling him he needs to go to the hospital as he really needs help. Izuku would brush her off as he would continue off walking, as she would just look at Izuku's determination to just leave. It was insane. She saw what he had done, risking his own body to just try to make it into the hero course, and she would kind of admire how much he wanted to get into the course. Izuku would end up making it home battered and bloodied, as he would then end up telling his mom he was fine, as he would go to his room and start to patch himself up, as he would then begin waiting to see if he had made it into UA. 2 weeks would pass before the letter would arrive. Those 2 weeks would be spent with Izuku training, as he knew if he spent 2 weeks of not training, his body would regress in where he wanted to be. So Izuku would end up opening up the letter, as he would then read. We're sorry to inform you, Izuku, that you have not made the hero course. However, you have made it into class 1C, so you are welcome to come for the school year. We admit that your talents are very, very well adapted to your quirklessness. However, we are sorry. We just don't think somebody who's quirkless can become a hero. Izuku would crumple up the paper, as he would then throw it at his wall. Everything he had worked for is now crumbling away. Even after he had already made it into UA barely, even though he saved somebody, even though he had enough points to pass. He knew he had enough points, especially with the rescue points that he got from saving Uraraka. He knew he should have passed. However, just because a simple word on his birth certificate, which read Quirkless, decided whether or not he would end up becoming a hero or not. He just didn't want this to become the case. He didn't want to not become a hero. He wanted to become a hero all of his life. And now he couldn't. All because he was named Quirkless. He was the Quirkless child. So Izuku would end up going to UA anyway. However, he would still train, maybe even harder, since that letter He framed it and put it up next to his bed. He read it every single day. He used that as motivation to work even harder than before. He knew he could still make it into the hero course, just like Shinso had in their second year. That second year, Mineta was replaced and Shinso had made it into the hero course. Sure, this was either a dream or a different reality, but Izuku still thought that rule may still exist, so Izuku would still try to make it into the hero course. So Izuku would end up arriving into UA Class 1C as probably one of the most fit kids there, as Izuku would then sit down, as he would then look up to see the teacher, as the teacher wouldn't be a hero like it probably would for maybe the other hero classes. It would just be a normal, regular teacher. Kind of disappointing when you think he could have had a cool hero teacher, maybe like Aizawa or Midnight. So Izuku would really care about this though, as he wouldn't let this stop him, as the teacher would then tell all of the students one by one to come up to the board and say their name and their quirk. Izuku would end up going last, however, he would realize something. Almost half the kids in his class were quirkless, and this made him realize he was in a group of the same type of people like he was. They were all quirkless too. There wasn't going to be a load of people just bullying somebody when a lot of them were quirkless themselves. Why would he get bullied by his own kind, basically? So Izuku would end up coming up to the board and would say he was quirkless as well, and despite him thinking he was about to get laughed at, he wasn't. Nobody really cared, as the teacher would then shove him back to his seat or shoo him back to his seat as they would then begin their lesson. The day would end up ending after they went to the just opening to tell all the students they hope they have a good year, as Izuku would end up starting to walk away from UA, as Izuku would decide to take sort of a back road that he hasn't really taken before. He just thought it would be good exercise. However, Izuku could sense somebody was watching him, so Izuku would be on high alert, waiting for something to happen. So as soon as somebody jumped down behind him, Izuku would grab their neck, placing them down on the ground, as Izuku would realize this was the Class 1A teacher, Mr. Aizawa. Izuku had seen him during the day with his class outside. One of the kids in his class even pointed out that that was Mr. Aizawa who taught Class 1A. Izuku would be confused why Mr. Aizawa was following him. However, Mr. Aizawa would then tell Izuku to relax, as he wanted to ask Izuku something. Izuku would look up at Aizawa and ask him what he wanted to ask him, as Izuku would then be told something that could possibly change his life. Aizawa just told Izuku, "I want to train you, Izuku. I saw the potential you had during the entrance exam. You had more potential than practically anybody in my class. And so I think you should have been in my class." However, Nezu was hesitant, just because you were quirkless. However, I want to prove him wrong. I want to teach you. I want to teach you all the things I know so you can become a hero, the first ever quirkless hero. Izuku would look up at Aizawa smiling for one of the first times in ages. He had always been focused on training, and now he could possibly have a gateway into the hero course. Aizawa would then tell Izuku something. You have just around 2 to 3 months before the a sports festival. This is where you can have the opportunity to prove Nezu wrong and get into the hero course. All you have to do is make it to the 1v1 tournament and win that tournament at the end of the sports festival. If you do that, you will be put into Class 1A. It has always happened to anybody in the general classes if they have won the 1v1 course, they will have the option to go into one of the hero classes. And I have no doubt if I tell Nezu I want you in my class and you have won, you will most likely be placed into my class. Izuku would nod his head at Aizawa, as Izuku would then also be told something about training. Aizawa would give Izuku a location that Izuku would need to get up at 3 a.m. every morning and to travel to this location on foot, and that is where they would train until time for UA. So Izuku would get up at 3 a.m., walk over or run over to the location Aizawa had given Izuku, and then Izuku would train for pretty much the entire first half of the day up until UA started or school started, and that is where Izuku would have to go back into school, and that is where he would do all of the learning and stuff, as then he would get out of school, train for another 2 hours, and then would leave, go to sleep, wake up at 3 a.m., train, go to school, then get out of school, train, eat, go to sleep. It was a very exhausting cycle for Izuku over those 3 months. However, around halfway through that, he noticed that Aizawa had just stopped showing up. Izuku would continue to do the training regimens Aizawa had assigned him. However, Aizawa would start showing up less and less, as Izuku was just confused by this. He didn't know why Aizawa would just stop showing up. Maybe this was a sort of test to see if Izuku would keep going and even push himself harder, which Izuku did. However, there was one reason why Aizawa had to stop coming to these meetings very late in the morning, or very early in the morning. It was because of villains attacking UA. The entire thing had been covered up to the point where practically nobody in the UA general courses knew about this, only the kids in the hero courses knew about it, and Aizawa couldn't let this slip to Izuku. Sure, they had been training for practically a month and a half, but Aizawa didn't trust Izuku just yet. So Izuku would continue training, and Aizawa would just flat out stop showing up. After the date of the USJ incident happened, Izuku noted that this was the day that a field trip was supposed to occur for Class 1A, and that was all he knew. He didn't know the location or anything else that happened. Everything had been covered up. No news outlets or anything had told a story about anything that could have happened, so Izuku wasn't quite sure what had been going on. However, one last day before the sports festival occurred, Aizawa would tell Izuku that this is his chance. This is his shot at making it, and this is why we've been training for so long. Izuku would ask Aizawa why he had just stopped appearing for how many times. Aizawa would just look at Izuku and brush off the question, just giving a simple answer that he was busy. Izuku wouldn't really care about this and would just not care. He would just say, alright, as he would then walk off. There was still around a week left, but Aizawa had ended the training early. He knew that Izuku's muscles were probably very, very tired and sore from all that training, so Aizawa would give Izuku around a week break before the sports festival just to rest up. However, Izuku wouldn't really rest. He would just cut back on some of the intensity. However, he would keep on continuing the grind, continuing to try to get stronger and as strong as possible. So Izuku would continue this, continue going to his classes like normal, continuing to get even smarter than he was studying after class. He got very, very little sleep. He would study from around 9 p.m. to 12 p.m., getting as smart as possible and as much knowledge in his brain as possible, and would then go to sleep for around 3 hours and would then wake up. He would get very, very few hours of sleep every night. His only exceptions were the weekends where he would get a lot of hours of sleep, and this is where he would get most of his sleep made up. He would get tons of sleep during the weekend, while very, very little during the weekdays. So, when the day finally came, Izuku would have been very well prepared, and all of his classmates knew what he was doing. All of them knew he was training as best as he could to try to make it into the hero course. And all of them, most of them being Quirkless, remember, supported this idea. They wanted a Quirkless hero to finally stand up for the Quirkless, to finally show the Quirkless some respect, and to show that Quirkless people can become heroes too. So they supported Izuku. They wanted him to get into the hero class. And so they would support him with every fiber of their being. They wanted him to get in. And so they would support him as best as they could, just trying to give him support, saying, telling him encouraging things like he's got this, he can do this. And Izuku, this would help motivate Izuku, knowing that he couldn't let his classmates down. So the sports festival date would finally occur. And that's where this what if is going to be left off, guys, for part 2, which will come out sometime later. I'm not quite sure. It will come out sometime. Hopefully. I'm just kidding. But comment down your what if suggestions below so I can read them and possibly get any ideas for new what ifs. And if your what if suggestion gets a lot of likes, maybe I'll even pop it into a poll on the community tab where it could possibly have the chance to then become an actual what if of mine. I'm hoping to get back into maybe sort of daily uploads or every other day uploads. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed today's video. I thank you all for watching. Remember, this is Anime Outlet, and this was part 1 of What If Deku Stayed Quirkless. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.